Welcome to Wellsprings Community Church.
So, I want to tell you a story of something that happened a few years ago. I haven't warned Susie I'm going to tell this story, so I'll get into trouble later. Before we were married, back in sometime in the 1990s it must have been, there was one evening I decided to take Susie out on a romantic evening. So we went to the cinema, and we watched a film called Saving Private Ryan, which is a really romantic film to watch. Everybody's seen Saving Private Ryan? Are you with me on the... Yeah. It was brand new at that point. It had just come out. We went to see it. The cinema was quite full. Exmouth Cinema isn't very big, so there were lots of people sort of crammed in. We sat there, and I've got Susie sat next to me. And just as the film was about to start, this old man came in, sort of a little bit doddery, and he came, and he needed to push past where we were to be able to sit down in the seat that he'd got booked. And you know, when you've got that sort of decision to make, do you swivel your legs or do you stand, and all that sort of thing. And from the way that he was walking, I thought, I need to stand up. So I stood up, and he sort of came past, and I breathed in, and he sat on the seat right next to me. That was the one that he got booked. And that was fine. The lights went off fairly soon after that. He came in at the last minute, and the film started. And if you've seen the film, you know it's the first 20, 25 minutes is the most incredible piece of filmmaking that I think I've ever seen. Steven Spielberg directed it. And basically, you are there on D-Day storming the beaches. And the camera shots are all done with a mobile camera, and it's moving around, and there's explosions going off, and people... It's horrible. It really is horrible. If you've seen it, you'll know, you'll understand what I mean. It's this incredible piece of filmmaking. As the film was going on, and all of that was happening, I sort of heard this slight noise from next to me, and looked, and the man who'd come in, this old man who'd come in and sat next to me, was sobbing. And when it got to an appropriate moment, I sort of said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm fine." He said, "I was there at the D-Day landings, and that's just like it was." And for him, it had brought back all that memory and all that emotion and all that stuff. And I thought, what do I say? What can I say to someone who's been through what I've just watched on this screen as being the most horrible thing? What can I say? And me being me, at that point, I had another story pop in my head. It's a story that I'd heard being told about... there's different versions of it. It's either the Prince of Wales or the Duke of York during the First World War. Soldiers have been brought back from the front with injuries, and they've been put in a special military hospital. And he went to visit them in the military hospital. And as he was walking along, arriving, the doctor met him and shook his hand and welcomed him, and said that he was going to introduce him to all the people who were there as patients at this military hospital. And so they went through a couple of wards, and Prince of Wales, Duke of York, shook hands with people and chatted to them and did, you know, when the royal family are doing all that, so he did all that with them. And they got to the end of the time going through these two wards, and the doctor was sort of, "Oh, we've done that now, we'll move on to something different." And he said to the doctor, "Is there anybody else who I haven't seen?" And he said, "Well, there's a few more patients, but they really are messed up. They really, you wouldn't want to see them. They're in such a state that." And he said, "No, I'd like to see them." So he went in and he met all of them and chatted to them and shook hands with them. And then as he moved out of that ward, he said, "Is that really everybody now?" And they said, "Well, no, there's one more person, but he really is in such... even the doctors don't like going in to see him because of what's happened, and it's really horrible. He probably won't be able to talk to you." Well, he definitely won't. He won't be able to respond to you. He's probably only got a few hours left, and he's such a horrible condition, we didn't think you'd want to see him. And he said, "No, I'd like to see him, please." And so he went in and left the doctor at the door and went in and sat on the edge of the bed with this man. And then after a couple of minutes, he leaned over and whispered something in the man's ear and then kissed him on the forehead and then walked back out. And the doctor said, I hope you don't mind me asking, but I know that probably he won't have heard what you've said, he won't have understood what you've said, there was no comeback from him in any kind of way. What on earth did you say to him? And he said, well, I said the only thing I could say. I said, thank you. And I kissed him and I came back out. And that story went whizzing through my head as I'm sat next to this man who's sobbing because he'd been there and lived what I was seeing on the screen in front of me. So I didn't kiss him on the forehead. But I said, can I just say thank you? Because what else could I say? I can't teach somebody like that anything. I can't. But I can say thank you for what he's done. And for what all those around him had done. But whenever I think about Remembrance Sunday and that story of what happened that day in Exmouth in the cinema comes into my mind quite often when I think about it, because I haven't met that many people who were there and fought and would express things in that way. I think about the cenotaph. I couldn't talk to you without saying, let me tell you about the Greek word, or the Hebrew word. I couldn't do a talk without saying that. Do we all know what cenotaph means? Because it's a Greek word. Cenotaph means empty tomb. And so when we go to the cenotaph, and when we watch the cenotaph on the screen, we'll see there's this thing there, and it's an empty tomb. It's shaped like a coffin on the top, but actually it's empty. And it's called the cenotaph because it's an empty tomb. There's no one there. The tomb is empty. But it's there as a reminder to all of us about what people have done and what people have given. And it's a reminder of death. But in that place of death, it's an empty tomb. I'm wearing my poppy today. I'm not really into celebrating things like this, but I recognise the place of saying thank you. And I recognise the place of memorial and the place of remembering so that we don't do things again. And I wanted to find out more about the poppy for this morning. I don't know why. I think I'm going to do some stuff in schools, and so I was looking up. And we have the poppy as a reminder of what happened. Why do we have the poppy as a reminder? Because it's growing in the fields of the First World War, in Flanders Field and all that sort of stuff. Because a poppy, at that point, was the only thing that would grow in those fields. Because there was so much mud and so much mess and so much water and so much blood and so much all this other stuff there that nothing would grow. The grass gets smashed up. And the only things, the first things that would grow in that kind of situation are poppies. And we have a poppy as a reminder of the first new life that comes after death. Of that horrible situation, of the horrible things that are there in that field, but the poppy grows, the first new life, that life overcoming the death that's happened there. We need to say thank you to the people who've done so much for us in the past. Whether we know them or not, whether we can actually verbalize that to them or not, at least in our thoughts, in our prayers, in our hearts, we say thank you. But as we do that, we remember about the cenotaph, the fact that it's an empty tomb. We remember about in the place of death, that new life comes, and that's why we have the poppy as the symbol, because it's that reminder of new life in the place of death. And as we say thank you to those people who've done so much for us in the past and still today do so much for us, I think it just for me is a constant reminder, as we're going to think about later, I don't want to steal anything that Andrew might say, a reminder of someone else who gave their life for us. Someone else who had an empty tomb, a cenotaph. Someone who was the new life that sprang from the place of death to overcome and to defeat those things. So let's say thank you, however that's possible for us, to and for those people who've done those things for us in the past, in wars, in fighting, in keeping us safe, in giving us peace, in giving us freedom. But let's remember as well the one who gave his life so that we can have freedom and we can have life and we can have peace and we can have all those things. And how he is that constant reminder with his cenotaph that it's an empty tomb. And that he's like the poppy, the first new life to come from that place of death. So later on, let's thank him for what he's done for us as well. Let me pray, and then we'll put the TVs on, Tyler, if that's okay. Lord Jesus, thank you that we can spend these next few minutes joining with the people in London and I'm sure all around the world who will watch and see the King laying his wreath and all the different people who are taking part in the service and having the silence. Lord, help us to fully connect with that. Help us to thank those people. But Lord, throughout this service, help us to thank you for who you are and for what you've done. Your cenotaph, your empty tomb. You being the poppy who is the new life in the place of death. And the difference that the truth, the reality of that can make in our lives today. Pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.